I was standing barefoot on cold tile holding a mug I hadn't touched when my phone buzzed for the ninth time in under 5 minutes. It was Christmas Eve morning, 6:30, dark outside, snow pressed against the windows like it was trying to listen. The caller ID read Mom. I didn't answer. That alone would have shocked anyone who knew me. For 32 years, I answered every call. I answered through meetings, through migraines, through funerals, through breakups. I answered even when I already knew the call would cost me something. But that morning, something inside me finally went quiet. I let the phone buzz until it stopped. Then I set it face down on the counter like it was something dangerous. I didn't know yet that by the end of the day, my family would call me heartless, unstable, selfish, ungrateful, and cruel. I didn't know police officers would later knock on my door. I didn't know my sister would cry on the floor of my childhood home, or that my mother would tell people I had lost my mind. All I knew was this: for the first time in my life, I was not going to show up when they demanded it. And that terrified me. My name is Claire Donovan. I was 31 that winter, single, childless. According to my family, that meant I had flexibility, which was their favorite polite word for availability. I worked as a compliance manager at a healthcare consulting firm outside Chicago, the kind of job that required precision, long hours, and a spotless reputation. I had built that career quietly, carefully, without any help from the people who now felt entitled to my time. To them, I was still just Claire, the one who could fill in, the one who didn't have real responsibilities. The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't my mother. It was my sister Lauren. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. A familiar heaviness settled in my chest, the old instinct to fix, to smooth, to sacrifice before anyone even asked. I didn't answer. The silence felt wrong, like I was breaking a rule no one had ever written down but everyone expected me to follow. I carried my mug to the sink and poured the coffee out untouched. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I had imagined that the first time I refused them, I would shake or cry or panic. Instead, I felt something closer to numb clarity. 6 weeks earlier, I would have been packing an overnight bag right now. 6 weeks earlier, I would have been driving 3 hours to my parents' house with gifts in the trunk and dread in my stomach rehearsing apologies I didn't owe. 6 weeks earlier, I was still trying to earn a place I already deserved. That changed the night my mother decided my life was convenient enough to spend without asking. The memory surfaced uninvited, sharp and immediate. It had been early November. I remembered because the office was quiet, in that particular way it gets after daylight saving time ends, when everyone leaves before the dark settles too deeply. I had stayed late reviewing a regulatory audit that could have cost our firm millions if mishandled. I was proud of the work, tired but proud. My phone rang just as I shut down my computer. Mom, I almost let it go to voicemail that night. Almost. Hi, sweetheart, she said too brightly, the tone she used when she was about to volunteer me for something. I leaned against my desk and closed my eyes. Hey, Mom. We're finalizing Christmas plans, she said, not asking if I was free to talk. And with everything going on, we're going to need you. There it was, not want, need. She explained it like a logistical puzzle already solved. Lauren's husband was overwhelmed. My brother Mark had work travel. The kids were overstimulated. The house would be chaotic. So we thought, my mother continued, that it would be best if you took the children for a few days, just until after Christmas. The children meant 4 of them, ages ranging from toddler to 8, including one with food allergies and another who still woke up screaming at night, at my apartment, alone. For how long, I asked, already knowing the answer would be unreasonable. From the 23rd through the 27th, she said lightly. You work from home anyway. I remember staring at the framed photo on my desk, a certificate of recognition from the firm's board. My name printed in careful black letters, evidence of a life they never seemed to see. I can't do that, I said quietly. I have a year-end compliance deadline, and I haven't taken time off in almost 2 years. The silence on the other end hardened. Claire, my mother said, her voice flattening, you don't have children. You don't understand real exhaustion. That sentence had been used on me so many times it felt rehearsed. I understand responsibility, I said, and I'm saying no. The word no landed between us like a dropped plate. She recovered quickly, she always did. I already told Lauren you would help, she said. She's counting on you. I felt something twist in my stomach then. Not guilt, recognition. They had already decided. That was the moment. The exact moment something in me shifted from hurt to alert. Then you should call her back, I said, because I'm not doing this. She hung up on me. 2 days later, my sister stopped answering my texts. A week later, my brother sent a message saying Mom was really worried about me. Another week after that, I got an email from Human Resources at work asking if everything was all right because someone had called expressing concern about my emotional stability. That was when I realized this wasn't just about babysitting. This was about control. The phone buzzed again on my kitchen counter, dragging me back to the present. Voicemail notification. I didn't listen yet. Outside snow continued to fall soft and relentless, covering the street in white. It looked peaceful from above, the kind of quiet people post pictures of and call magical. I knew better. My family was already on their way. They believed I would cave. I always had before. They were about to learn that the version of me who folded herself into whatever shape they needed was gone. I didn't know yet how far they would go when they realized they had lost their grip. But I was about to find out, and so were they. By 8:15 that morning, the voicemails had stacked up like unopened bills. I didn't listen to them right away. That was deliberate. If I listened, I would hear my mother's voice soften, sharpen, then soften again. I would hear my sister's strain, my brother's disappointment wrapped in false concern. I would feel myself sliding back into the role they had trained me for since childhood. So instead, I showered. I let the hot water pound against my shoulders longer than necessary. I stood there until my fingers wrinkled and the mirror fogged, until my body remembered it belonged to me and not to whatever emergency my family had invented that day. When I finally wrapped myself in a towel and checked my phone, the count had climbed again. Mom, 12 missed calls. Lauren, 7. Mark, 2. Unknown number 1. That last one made my stomach tighten. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the first voicemail. Claire, this is ridiculous, my mother snapped, skipping pleasantries. We are standing here trying to finalize plans and you are making this unnecessarily difficult. Call me back immediately. The second voicemail came from Lauren. Her voice was strained higher than usual. I don't know what's going on with you, but this is really bad timing. I thought I could count on you. The kids are already excited. The third voicemail was my mother again, slower this time, wounded. I raised you better than this. I stopped there. I didn't need to hear the rest to know how the progression would go. Anger would give way to guilt. Guilt would curdle into accusation. Accusation would turn into martyrdom. They had perfected the rhythm. I dressed quickly, jeans and a sweater, nothing festive. No red, no green. I wasn't playing Christmas that year. As I poured cereal into a bowl, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. Can you just talk to Mom? She's really upset. We all are. We all. That phrase had followed me my entire life. We all think you're overreacting. We all agree this is best. We all talked and decided. We all never seemed to include me. I typed a response, erased it, typed again. I am not available to take the kids. That hasn't changed. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You know Lauren's under a lot of stress right now, Mark replied. This would mean a lot. I stared at the screen. My brother had always been careful not to take sides openly. He didn't need to. He benefited either way. If I complied, the burden shifted to me. If I didn't, the fallout wasn't his to absorb. That was when the knock came. Sharp, confident, not a neighbor's knock. My heart started pounding. I moved slowly to the door and checked the peephole. Lauren stood in the hallway, coat half buttoned, cheeks flushed from the cold. Behind her, slightly out of focus, I could see my mother's familiar posture. Arms crossed, jaw set, ready. They hadn't called to ask if I was home. They had come to collect. I didn't open the door. The knocking resumed louder now. Claire, Lauren called, forcing cheer into her voice. We know you're in there. I stayed silent. Don't do this, my mother said, her voice sharp enough to carry through the wood. We're not leaving until you talk to us. My hand rested on this doorknob. Muscle memory urged me to turn it, to smooth this over, to invite them in and explain myself like a child defending a bad grade. Instead, I stepped back. My phone buzzed with the notification from my door camera app. Motion detected. Good. Let it record. Claire, my mother said, again, lower now, dangerous. Open the door. I didn't. Minutes passed. I imagined my neighbors peeking through their doors, the familiar Donovan drama unfolding in the hallway like it always did. Public enough to shame, private enough to control. Finally, Lauren sighed loudly. This is insane, she muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. She's always been dramatic. That sentence cut deeper than anything my mother had said. Always. As if my resistance was a personality flaw rather than a response. My mother knocked again, slower this time. Fine, she said, if you want to do this the hard way. The hallway fell quiet. I waited until I heard their footsteps retreat before exhaling. I hadn't won anything, I knew that. I had just escalated. By noon, the first post went up on Facebook. My mother didn't tag me, but she didn't need to. It was vague, performative, and devastatingly effective. Some days as a parent, your heart breaks in ways you never imagined. You give everything to your children, and sometimes they turn away when you need them most. Please keep our family in your prayers this Christmas. The comments started immediately. So sorry, Patricia. You're such a good mom. Kids these days don't appreciate sacrifice, praying she comes to her senses. I scrolled until my chest tightened, then locked my phone. This was always her move. Control the narrative before I could speak. I went back to my kitchen and opened my laptop. Work was the one place where facts still mattered, where timelines and documentation carried weight. As I logged in, an email notification popped up. From Human Resources subject quick check-in. My stomach dropped. The message was polite, carefully worded. Claire, we received a call from a concerned individual expressing worry about your well-being. There is no action required at this time, but we wanted to touch base and ensure everything is okay. Concerned individual. I knew exactly who that was. My mother hadn't just gone to Facebook, she had gone to my employer. I closed my eyes and let the realization settle. This was no longer a family disagreement, this was retaliation. I responded to HR calmly, professionally, assuring them I was well and fully focused on my responsibilities. I attached my completed reports from the previous week without being asked. A paper trail of competence. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it simply Records. I saved screenshots of the Facebook post, the voicemail timestamps, the HR email, the door camera footage of them standing outside my apartment. I didn't know yet how far this would go, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Lauren was not the problem. Lauren was the favorite, and favorites are protected. The rest of us learned to survive on what's left. That afternoon, as snow continued to fall and the world prepared for Christmas, my phone buzzed with one final message from my mother. You're forcing my hand, Claire. I hope you're ready for the consequences. I stared at the screen. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt prepared. The consequences arrived faster than I expected. The morning after my mother's message, I woke to an email marked urgent from a sender I didn't recognize. The subject line stopped my breath mid-inhale. Regarding the Donovan estate. For a moment, I just stared at it, my phone heavy in my hand. My grandmother, Margaret Donovan, had died less than 3 months earlier. The grief was still close to the surface, sharp enough that even thinking her name felt like pressing on a bruise. I opened the email. Ms. Donovan. We are writing in reference to the estate of Margaret Evelyn Donovan. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss a matter requiring your immediate attention. Sincerely, Harrison Bloom and Keller Estate and Trust Attorneys. My first thought was that something had gone wrong. A clerical error, a missing signature. My grandmother had always been meticulous, the kind of woman who labeled file folders and kept handwritten notes in the margins of everything she read. My second thought came colder and clearer. My mother. I called the number. The receptionist transferred me to a man named Stephen Keller. His voice was calm, professional, practiced. Claire Donovan, he said, confirming my identity. Thank you for calling back so quickly. We've been trying to reach you. About my grandmother, I said. Is there a problem? There was a brief pause, just long enough to register as careful. There's no problem, he said. But there is information you have not been given. I sat down at my kitchen table. What information? Your grandmother amended her will approximately 9 months before her death, he said. The updated document was filed correctly and is legally binding. I swallowed. I was told everything was handled. Yes, he replied evenly, by your mother. The word landed like a weight. What does the amendment say? I asked. Another pause. You are named as the sole beneficiary of the property at Lake Briar. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. The lake house. The Donovan property had been in the family since before I was born. It was where every summer holiday happened, where my grandmother taught me to swim, where I learned how to make her peach cobbler and drink coffee strong enough to make my eyes water. My mother had always spoken about it as if it already belonged to her. What I whispered. There is also a trust account attached to the property, Keller continued. The funds are designated for maintenance and personal use under specific conditions set by your grandmother. My hand trembled against the table. Why am I only hearing this now? Because your grandmother requested that the contents of the amended will not be disclosed until after the holidays, he said. And because your mother asked us not to contact you. There it was. She didn't have the authority to do that, I said. No, he agreed, she did not. A sound escaped my throat that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been edged with disbelief. Has my mother been informed? I asked. Yes, Keller said. She contacted our office yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. The same morning she stood in my hallway demanding I open the door. She was under the impression that the property would transfer to her, he added carefully. She was displeased to learn otherwise. I closed my eyes. The pieces slid into place with a clarity that made my stomach turn. The sudden urgency about Christmas, the pressure to take the children, the escalation when I refused, the call to my employer. This wasn't about family. It was about inheritance. What are the conditions? I asked. The property cannot be sold or transferred for a period of 5 years, Keller said. Your grandmother was very specific about that. She described the house as a place of refuge and insisted it remain so. Tears burned behind my eyes. That sounded like her. There is also a letter addressed to you, he added. Handwritten. Would you like us to mail it or hold it for pickup? Mail it, I said quickly, please. When the call ended, I sat there in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. My grandmother had known. She had seen what I tried not to. The way my mother treated people like extensions of her needs. The way love came with expectations and ledgers and unspoken debts. And she had chosen me anyway. My phone rang. Mom, I didn't answer. Instead, I waited. An hour later, the text began. I know you've been talking to lawyers. You had no right to go behind my back. That house was meant for the family. The family. Always the family, never me. I typed once, erased it, then typed again. Grandma made her choice. The response came immediately. She was confused when she signed that. You know how she was near the end. Rage surged through me so fast it left me dizzy. She was confused my mother had said about the woman who taught herself Italian in her 60s and balanced her checkbook until the week she died. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By evening, my brother Mark called. This is getting out of hand, he said without preamble. Mom's saying you manipulated Grandma. I said I didn't even know. There was a pause. I could hear his breathing. She's talking about contesting the will, he said. About making this ugly. I smiled humorless. She can try. Silence. Claire, he said quietly, what are you doing? For the first time I answered honestly. I'm protecting myself. He exhaled. I don't think Mom expected you to push back. She never does. After we hung up, I checked my email again. Another message from the law firm had arrived. Attached was a scanned copy of my grandmother's letter. I didn't open it right away. I waited until the apartment was dark, until the snow outside reflected the streetlights in soft halos, until I was alone enough to feel whatever was coming. Then I opened the file. My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then I was right about something I wish I had been wrong about. Your mother will not like what I have done. She will tell you I was confused. I was not. I saw very clearly who showed up, who stayed, and who listened. You were my peace in the last years of my life. This house is not a reward. It is a shield. Use it when you need quiet. Use it when the noise becomes too much. You owe no one your exhaustion. I pressed my hand to my mouth. She had seen me. She had known exactly what this would cost. And she had given it to me anyway. Outside, snow continued to fall indifferent and clean, covering everything that came before. Inside, something settled. My mother thought I had taken something from her. She was wrong. My grandmother had given me something far more dangerous. Permission. And my family had no idea what I was about to do with it. The letter changed everything, but it didn't calm the storm. It sharpened it. The day after I received my grandmother's letter, my mother stopped pretending this was about feelings. The messages turned legal, accusatory, precise. She wasn't begging anymore. She was building a case. I knew the tone well. It was the same voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while doing something unforgivable. I woke to 3 missed calls and 1 email from her before 7 in the morning. Subject: we need to correct the record. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. Chamomile like my grandmother used to drink at night. I needed my hands steady before I read whatever poison waited on the other side of that screen. When I finally opened the email, my pulse spiked. Claire. I have spoken to an attorney. What you are doing is extremely concerning. There are questions about your involvement in the last year of your grandmother's life that need to be addressed. I am trying to protect you, but if this continues, certain facts may come to light that could be damaging to your reputation and career. Please call me today so we can resolve this privately. Protect you. That word again. always used as a threat. I stared at the screen until the meaning settled in my bones. She wasn't warning me, she was blackmailing me. I forwarded the email to my work account and saved it in the records folder. Then I called the estate attorney back. Has my mother contacted you again? I asked Stephen Keller. Yes, he said, several times. About contesting the will. And about you, he added. I closed my eyes. What exactly is she claiming? She's implying undue influence, he said carefully. That you isolated your grandmother. That you pressured her. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. I visited her twice a month. My mother barely went. That matches what we have on record, he said. And the medical evaluations from that period support full cognitive capacity. Good. There's something else, Keller continued. Your mother requested copies of financial records, specifically anything with your name attached. My stomach tightened. What records? She was vague, he said, but her interest seemed less about the house and more about access. Access. That word followed me into the afternoon like a shadow. I logged into my credit monitoring account that evening more out of instinct than fear. I had excellent credit. Always had. I paid bills early. I never carried balances. Responsibility had been my armor. The page loaded slowly. Then I saw it. An account I didn't recognize. A credit card opened 18 months earlier. High limit, near maxed out. Payment status delinquent. My name. My social security number. Billing address my parents' house. The room tilted. I clicked through the transactions, my breath coming shallow and fast. Furniture stores, restaurants, online retailers, travel bookings, and one recurring charge that made my hands start to shake. Lakeside Senior Care. The facility my mother claimed she couldn't afford when my grandmother needed additional support. The one she told me was too expensive while I rearranged my life to help. She had been paying for it. With my identity. I sat there staring at the screen, a cold clarity settling in. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. She hadn't just wanted my time. She had wanted my credit, my reputation, my clean record. She had taken it all without asking. I took screenshots of everything, the account details, the billing address, the transaction history, the dates. Then I picked up my phone and called Mark. He answered on the second ring. Did you know I asked skipping hello? A long pause. Know what? About the credit card, I said. In my name. Silence stretched. I didn't know the details, he said finally. But Mom mentioned something about handling Grandma's expenses. By committing fraud, she said it was temporary, he replied weakly, that she'd fix it. I laughed sharp and bitter. How long did you know? About 6 months, he admitted. 6 months. And you didn't tell me. I didn't want to get involved, he said. You know how she gets. Yes, I said quietly, I do. After I hung up, I sat very still. My mother wasn't afraid of exposure. She was counting on my silence, on my fear of rocking the boat, on my need to be seen as the reasonable one. She had miscalculated. The next morning I called the bank. The fraud department was calm, methodical. They asked questions. I answered them clearly. Dates, addresses, authorization. I had none to give. This qualifies as identity theft, the representative said. Would you like to file a formal report? I hesitated. Pressing charges against your own mother was a line most people never imagined crossing. But then I remembered the email, the threat, the way she tried to paint me as unstable while stealing from me. Yes, I said, I would. The report number was emailed to me within minutes. That afternoon my phone rang. Mom, I answered. How dare you, she said without preamble. How dare you involve the bank? You involved the bank when you opened the account, I replied evenly. It was family money, she snapped. I used it for family needs. You committed a felony, I said, and you did it in my name. Her voice shifted the way it always did when she realized she'd gone too far. I was under pressure, she said. You don't understand what it's like to carry everyone. I understand exactly what it's like, I said. I've been carrying you for years. There was a beat of silence. Then she said it. If you don't drop this, I will tell your employer everything. About your mental state. About your behavior. About how you've been acting since Grandma died. I smiled slow and cold. You already did, I said, and I documented it. She inhaled sharply. What? You called my employer, I continued. You put it in writing. You used my career as leverage. That's on record now. Her breathing quickened. You think you're so smart, she hissed. You think this house makes you powerful. No, I said. I think the truth does. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. My mother had built her authority on secrets and silence, on the belief that I would always choose peace over justice. She was about to learn the cost of that assumption, because once you see the lie buried in your own name, you can never unsee it. And I was done carrying it for her. The fraud report didn't stay quiet for long. 3 days after I filed it, the bank froze the account. 2 days after that, a certified letter arrived at my parents' house addressed to my mother. I knew because Mark called me in a panic, his voice low, like someone afraid of being overheard. She got a letter, he said, from the bank. Something about investigation findings. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the kitchen counter. And I asked, "And she's losing it," he said. "Like, really losing it. She's saying you've crossed a line you can't come back from." That almost made me laugh. "Did she mention the part where she opened a credit card in my name?" I asked. "She says you're exaggerating," he replied, "that it was all going to be sorted out." 18 months of charges is not sorting something out, I said. Mark sighed. "I know, I've never seen her like this." That was the part he still didn't understand. I'd seen her panic before, just not directed at me. I'd seen it when things slipped out of her control, when people didn't respond the way she expected. It always came out as rage first, then desperation, then tears. The pattern never changed. That afternoon, my sister Lauren finally called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what she would say now that pretending was no longer an option. "What were you thinking?" she demanded the moment I picked up. "I was thinking about my credit," I said calmly, "and my career, and the fact that Mom stole my identity." Lauren scoffed. She didn't steal anything. She was trying to keep the family afloat. "With my name," I replied, "without my consent." "You could have talked to us first," she snapped. "You didn't have to go nuclear." I closed my eyes. This was always her role. To minimize, to reframe, to make consequences sound like overreactions. "I did talk," I said. "For years. You just didn't listen because it was easier not to." She went quiet for a moment. Then she said the sentence that finally cracked something open. "You've always thought you were better than us." I laughed then, a short, hollow sound. "No," I said. "I thought I was responsible for you. There's a difference." "That house went to your head," she shot back. "Grandma should have split it. Mom deserved it." "Grandma made her choice," I said, just like Mom made hers. Lauren's voice dropped. "You're going to destroy this family." I let that hang between us. "No," I said quietly, "I'm just not saving it anymore." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel pressure change before a storm. It arrived the next morning in the form of another email, this time from a law firm I recognized. Subject notice of intent to contest estate. My mother was officially trying to challenge the will. I forwarded it immediately to Stephen Keller and to a new contact I had added 2 days earlier. My own attorney. Her name was Rachel Stein. She came recommended by a colleague who'd once described her as the woman you hire when you're done being polite. She called me within an hour. "I've reviewed what you sent," she said. "Your mother doesn't have much of a case, but she's aggressive." "I know," I said. "There's more," Rachel continued. "The bank investigation is moving quickly. Based on what you provided, this isn't just civil, it's criminal." I exhaled slowly. "What happens next?" "That depends on you," she said. "You can let the process play out quietly, or you can apply pressure." "Pressure how?" She paused. "Your mother has been presenting a certain narrative. About you, about your stability, about your motives. If you want leverage, you document everything, and you stop letting her control the story." The words landed heavy and true. I had spent my life reacting, explaining, defending. This was something else. That afternoon, I received a call from Human Resources again. This time, they asked me to come in for a meeting. Not an accusation, not yet, but the subtext was clear. Someone was still talking. I walked into the conference room the next morning with a folder under my arm. Inside it were screenshots, timestamps, emails, voicemail transcriptions, the fraud report number, and my grandmother's letter. The HR director listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. Not emotionally, not defensively, just facts. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "This explains a great deal," she said. I nodded. "We will document this," she continued, "and we will not be accepting further communications from outside parties regarding your employment." "Thank you," I said. As I stood to leave, she added, "You handled this correctly." I almost cried at that, almost. When I got home, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Mom's lawyer called me. She wants me to write a statement about you, about Grandma." I stared at the screen. What did he say? There was a long pause before his reply came through. I said no. I sat down hard on the couch. She told me I was choosing sides. I smiled faintly. "You are." Another pause. She said if this goes to court, everything comes out. The credit cards, the calls to your job, all of it. I typed slowly. That's already coming out. The typing indicator appeared, vanished, reappeared. I should have told you sooner, he wrote. About the card, about the will stuff. I was scared. I thought of the ledger my mother kept in her head, the invisible debts she assigned us, the fear she used to keep everyone in line. I know I wrote back, but I'm not scared anymore. That evening, my mother showed up at my building again. This time she didn't knock. She called from the lobby. Come down, she said when I answered. We need to talk like adults. I went down, but I didn't invite her in. She looked different. Smaller. The confidence cracked just enough to show something frantic underneath. You've made your point, she said. Now let's fix this. I'm not fixing what I didn't break, I replied. She clenched her jaw. If you keep pushing, you'll regret it. I met her eyes. You already tried to ruin my career, I said. You already stole my identity. What's left? For a moment, she looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Then she said very quietly, You think this ends with you winning? I nodded once. No, I said, it ends with the truth. I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing there alone. Behind me, I heard her call my name. I didn't turn around, because that was the day they realized I wasn't bluffing. And nothing scares people like losing control over someone they thought they owned. The first subpoena arrived on a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly, because it was raining in that thin, relentless way that soaked through coats and moods alike. I had just come home from work, dropped my bag by the door, and kicked off my shoes when I noticed the envelope on the kitchen counter. Certified mail, government seal. My name typed cleanly on the front. For a split second, my chest tightened. Old habits die hard. Years of being told I was too sensitive had trained my body to expect punishment whenever authority appeared. Then I opened it. The subpoena wasn't for me. It was for my mother, issued as part of a broader financial investigation connected to the fraud report. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to relief. The system had noticed. I called Rachel immediately. They moved faster than I expected, she said after skimming the document I emailed her. This isn't just about the credit card anymore. What else? I asked. Your mother didn't just commit identity theft, Rachel replied. She used a falsified income profile to secure credit. That triggers a deeper audit. An audit. The word echoed in my head. Rachel continued. Once auditors start digging, they don't stop at one account. They look for patterns. Patterns. My mother had lived her life on patterns, borrowing here, shifting money there, calling it temporary, calling it family. How bad could this get? I asked. Rachel paused. That depends on how long she's been doing it. I thought of my grandmother's care, the constant talk of money problems, the way my mother always seemed to be scrambling but never transparent. She's been doing it for years, I said quietly. Rachel exhaled. Then this is bigger than a family dispute. That evening, Mark called me. She got something in the mail, he said, voice tight. Mom, a subpoena. She hasn't stopped pacing since it arrived. Did she read it? I asked. Yes, he said. She's convinced you orchestrated this. I smiled faintly. I didn't, I said. I just told the truth. She says you're trying to destroy her, he continued. I leaned against the counter, watching rain streak down the window. She destroyed herself, I said. I just stopped covering for it. There was a long silence on the line. She's asking everyone for loyalty statements, Mark finally said. She wants us to write letters about her character. About you. I closed my eyes. And what did you say? I said I wasn't comfortable lying, he replied. She called me ungrateful. That word again. Mark, I said gently, you don't have to pick sides. I already did, he said. I just didn't realize it until now. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and let the reality sink in. This wasn't a confrontation anymore. This was exposure. 2 days later, Lauren showed up at my door alone. No warning, no texts, just a knock that felt hesitant instead of demanding. I checked the camera before opening it. She looked different, tired. Her hair pulled back in a way that suggested she hadn't bothered styling it. I opened the door but didn't step aside. What do you want? I asked. She swallowed. To talk. About what? About Mom, she said, and everything. I hesitated, then stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. We stood there, sisters who had never learned how to speak without our mother's voice echoing between us. She's scared, Lauren said quietly. I've never seen her like this. Neither have I replied. But I've seen what she's capable of. Lauren nodded. She told me you're enjoying this. That stung more than I expected. I'm not enjoying it, I said. I'm surviving it. She looked down at her hands. I didn't know about the credit card, she admitted. Not really. I knew she was using your name for something, but she said you'd agreed. I laughed softly. Of course she did. I should have asked you, Lauren said. I didn't. No, I said, you didn't. She flinched but didn't argue. She wants me to testify, Lauren continued. About Grandma, about you. And I asked? I told her I wouldn't lie, she said. She hasn't spoken to me since. For the first time, I saw fear in my sister's eyes that had nothing to do with me. She's unraveling, Lauren whispered. And I don't know how to fix it. I met her gaze steady. You can't, I said. And it's not your job. Tears welled in her eyes, surprising us both. She always said you were the difficult one, Lauren said. The emotional one. I almost smiled. She needed someone to be, I replied. Lauren nodded slowly. I think I owe you an apology. I waited. For letting her use you, she said. For benefiting from it. I let the words settle. They didn't erase the past, but they cracked something open. Thank you, I said finally. That matters. She left soon after, quieter than she'd arrived. That night, another email came in from the estate attorney. Your mother attempted to file emergency paperwork to gain temporary control of the Lake Briar property. The court denied the request due to lack of standing. Denied. I forwarded it to Rachel. They're panicking, she replied. Desperate moves lead to mistakes. The next mistake came faster than I expected. The following morning, my bank flagged suspicious activity on my savings account. A failed attempt to access it from an unfamiliar IP address. The location traced back to my parents' neighborhood. I stared at the alert, heart pounding. She was still trying. I called Rachel immediately. She's escalating, I said. Yes, Rachel replied. Which means we accelerate too. What do you recommend? We request a full forensic audit, she said. Of your mother's finances. Court ordered. My breath caught. That would expose everything I said. Yes, Rachel replied. That's the point. I thought of my grandmother's letter. The word shield. The quiet certainty in her handwriting. Do it, I said. The motion was filed that afternoon. By evening, my mother left me a voicemail so raw it almost didn't sound like her. You think you've won, she said, voice shaking. You think you're righteous, but when this is over, you'll be alone. No family, no forgiveness. I listened to it once, then saved it. Not as a threat, as evidence, because the audit they never expected had begun. And once the books were open, there would be no closing them again. The audit didn't announce itself with sirens or headlines. It arrived quietly the way real consequences usually do. A week after Rachel filed the motion, a court-appointed forensic accountant contacted my mother. I only knew because Mark called me that night, his voice brittle, stretched thin. They're asking for everything, he said. Bank statements, credit accounts, loan documents, going back years. How many years, I asked. 10, he said, at least. I closed my eyes. 10 years was a lifetime of small lies stacked into something enormous. She says this is harassment, Mark added, that you're trying to humiliate her. I pictured my mother at the dining room table, papers spread everywhere, calculator clicking, trying to reconcile a story she'd told herself for decades with the numbers that refused to bend. I didn't ask for this, I said. I asked for my name back. The first crack showed 2 days later. Lauren called me late past midnight, her voice low like she was hiding in her own house. She's been moving money, she whispered, between accounts, closing some, opening others. That won't help, I said. I know, Lauren replied, but she thinks she can stay ahead of them. That was my mother's fatal flaw. She believed motion equaled control. The forensic accountant didn't. By the end of the week, Rachel forwarded me a preliminary summary. It wasn't the full report, but it was enough to make my hands shake. Multiple credit accounts opened using family members' information. Undisclosed personal loans taken against home equity. Withdrawals from joint accounts without consent. Irregular transfers coinciding with major family events. Birthdays, holidays, funerals. Every moment she framed as sacrifice had been monetized. The most damning detail sat near the bottom of the page. A pattern of small monthly transfers into a separate account labeled reserve. Not emergency savings, a contingency fund. She's been skimming, Rachel said when I called her, a little at a time, from everyone. Everyone I asked. Yes, she replied, including your brother and your sister. I swallowed hard. She kept a ledger, I murmured, in her head. No, Rachel corrected gently, on paper. The ledger surfaced 3 days later. Mark found it in a box in the garage while looking for tax documents. He sent me a photo before he even called. Yellowed notebook, handwritten columns, names at the top of each page. Mark, Lauren, Claire. Under each dates, amounts, notes. School supplies, babysitting, gas money, college help, emergency support. At the bottom of my page circled twice in red ink a total. $127,000. My mother believed I owed her a debt for being raised, for being fed, for being useful, for existing. When Mark finally called, he sounded hollow. She's been keeping score, he said. Our whole lives. Yes, I replied softly. She has. That night, Lauren showed up again. She didn't knock this time. She leaned against the wall outside my apartment like someone waiting for a verdict. I saw the ledger, she said. I nodded. So did I. She thinks you owe her, Lauren whispered. She told me you're ungrateful, that you took more than your share. I studied my sister's face, the familiar features now rearranged by shock. What do you think I asked? Lauren looked away. I think I never questioned it because I was always in the black. That admission mattered more than any apology. She's asking me to help her move money again, Lauren added, to hide it. Will you, I asked. No, she said immediately. I told her no. She laughed weakly. She said I was betraying her. I almost smiled. She taught us that word, I said, so we wouldn't recognize accountability. Lauren wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. What happens now, she asked. I exhaled slowly. Now the truth finishes what it started. The full forensic report landed 2 weeks later. It was devastating in its precision. Rachel walked me through it line by line in her office, her tone professional, unflinching. This establishes intent, she said, tapping a page. Repeated misuse of personal information, concealment, pattern deception. What does that mean legally, I asked. She met my eyes. It means charges are likely. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. Criminal, yes, she said. Financial fraud, identity theft, potentially elder financial abuse given your grandmother's involvement. The room felt very still. I never wanted this, I said. I know, Rachel replied, but wanting something doesn't make it true. That evening, my mother left me another voicemail. This one was different. No rage, no threats, just exhaustion. I don't understand when you became so cruel, she said quietly. After everything I gave you. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it, not because it hurt, because it was no longer relevant. 2 days later, my mother's attorney requested a meeting. Rachel attended with me. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Not weak, just diminished. Her confidence drained by fluorescent lighting and legal reality. They want to settle her, attorney said. Avoid charges. Resolve the estate issue quietly. Rachel raised an eyebrow. On what terms? My mother spoke, then her voice brittle. I will repay the money, she said, all of it. I met her gaze. With what I asked. Silence. The house, the savings, the reserve account, all of it was already accounted for. Rachel folded her hands. Repayment does not negate criminal behavior. My mother looked at me, then really looked. You'd send your own mother to prison, she said. I didn't flinch. No, I said, I told the truth. The rest isn't up to me. Her attorney cleared his throat. There may be an alternative, he said carefully. A plea agreement, reduced charges. Rachel nodded. We'll review it. As we stood to leave, my mother said one last thing. When this is over, she said, voice shaking, you'll have nothing left. I paused at the door. I turned back once. I already have everything, I said. I just stopped giving it to you. Outside, the air felt cleaner, colder, real. The numbers had spoken, and they had told a story no amount of tears could erase. The woman who built her power on secrecy was finally standing in full light. And she was afraid, as she should have been. The plea agreement didn't make the chaos quieter. It made it louder. Once lawyers entered the conversation officially, my mother stopped calling me and started calling everyone else. Aunts I barely spoke to, cousins who hadn't seen me in years, old family friends who remembered me as the quiet girl who helped clear plates after dinner. She told them I had betrayed her. She told them I was greedy. She told them I had manipulated my grandmother, ruined her reputation, and turned my siblings against her. Most importantly, she told them she was the victim. The messages began trickling in 2 days after the plea discussion. Your mother is devastated. Families don't do this to each other. Money changes people. I read them without responding. Rachel had warned me this would happen. When control fails privately, she said people attempt it publicly. My mother needed witnesses. She needed an audience for her suffering. What she didn't realize was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being seen. The turning point came from someone unexpected. My Aunt Helen. She was my mother's older sister, the one who lived 3 states away and visited only on major holidays. Quiet, observant, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. She called me on a Sunday afternoon. I've been meaning to talk to you, she said. Her voice was steady, not accusatory. I'm listening, I replied. She paused. Your mother called me. She told me you were unstable, that you'd gone behind her back with lawyers. And what did you think, I asked. I thought, Helen said slowly, that I've heard this story before. My breath caught. She did something similar when our mother died, Helen continued. Not the credit cards, but the narrative. She controlled what people knew, who spoke, who stayed quiet. I closed my eyes. She always does, I whispered. Helen sighed. I didn't challenge her then. It was easier not to. But this time the details didn't line up. What details? I asked. She said you were distant from your grandmother, Helen replied. That you barely visited. I laughed softly, bitter. I visited every other weekend, I said, sometimes more. I know, Helen said, because Margaret told me. The room felt suddenly very still. She said you were her calm. Helen continued. That when you were there, the house felt peaceful. She said she worried about what would happen to you after she was gone. Tears burned my eyes. She knew, I said. Yes, Helen replied. And that's why I believe you. That was the first time someone in my family said those words without hesitation. 2 days later, Aunt Helen sent an email to the extended family. Reply all. I wasn't copied initially, but Mark forwarded it to me with a single line. You should see this. The email was measured, calm, unemotional. Helen wrote about patterns, about control, about silence. She didn't accuse directly. She didn't use legal language. She simply described behavior she had witnessed over decades and invited others to consider whether this situation truly came out of nowhere. I am not choosing sides, she wrote. I am choosing honesty. The responses exploded. Some defended my mother immediately. Others asked questions. A few admitted quietly that they'd seen similar things. One message stood out. From a cousin I barely remembered. I always wondered why Claire was the one helping Grandma so much. Now it makes sense. The mask was slipping. My mother's next move was predictable. She went to Facebook. Her post went up late that night, long and emotional, framed as a confession, but carefully constructed. I made mistakes. I trusted too much. I gave too much. And now I am being punished by my own child. I am heartbroken beyond words. I hope someday she understands what unconditional love looks like. The comments poured in. But something was different this time. People asked questions. Why didn't you tell anyone about the credit card? Why did you contact her employer? Why does this keep happening in your relationships? My mother replied defensively at first, then deleted comments, then turned them off entirely. That was when I knew. She had lost control of the story. The official plea agreement was filed the following week. Reduced charges in exchange for full financial restitution, asset forfeiture, and a mandatory financial counseling program. No jail time, probation, a permanent mark on her record. Rachel explained it clinically. It's accountability without incarceration, she said. Given her age and the circumstances, this is a common outcome. How will she react? I asked. Rachel gave a thin smile. People who build their identity on being blameless don't handle accountability well. I found out exactly how poorly 2 days later. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Are you happy now? My mother demanded. Her voice was sharp, unfiltered, stripped of performance. This is what you wanted, she continued. Everyone knows. Everyone's whispering. I sat up in bed, heart pounding but mind clear. I wanted my name back, I said. I got it. You destroyed me, she spat. I inhaled slowly. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped protecting you. She laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. You think you're free, she said. But you'll always be alone. I didn't respond. I gave you everything, she continued. I sacrificed my life for you. That's the lie, I said quietly. You sacrificed me. Silence filled the line. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, surprised by how little it hurt. Later that morning, Mark came over. He looked tired, older, like someone who had finally put down a weight he didn't know he was carrying. She's furious, he said, but something else too. What? I asked. Scared, he admitted. She keeps saying she doesn't recognize her life anymore. I nodded, because it was built on a story that no longer works. Mark sat back on my couch. I didn't realize how much we all adapted around her, he said. How much of ourselves we gave up to keep things calm. That's how it works, I replied. One person controls the weather. Everyone else learns how to dress for it. He smiled faintly. What about you? He asked. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully. I feel, I said slowly, like I'm standing in my own life for the first time. That afternoon I drove out to Lake Briar. The house stood quiet against the water, winter light reflecting off the frozen surface. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of old wood and cold air. I walked to the window where my grandmother used to sit. This house is not a reward, it is a shield. She had known the storm would follow me here, but she had also known I would survive it. Back in the city, the fallout continued. The family reorganized itself without my mother at the center. Awkward at first, careful, then freer. Invitations changed tone. Conversations shifted. The fear loosened its grip. My mother retreated into silence. No posts, no calls, no messages. For someone who had always needed an audience, it was the loudest absence imaginable. The mask had fallen, and without it, she no longer knew who to be. For the first time, that wasn't my problem, and it never would be again. The quiet after the storm was unsettling. For weeks, my mother had filled every space with noise, calls, messages, accusations, tears delivered like weapons. And then suddenly, nothing. No voicemail, no texts, no dramatic posts, just silence. At first, my body didn't trust it. I kept my phone nearby, half expecting it to explode with another emergency, another demand. Years of conditioning don't disappear just because the source goes quiet. But the days passed, and nothing happened. That was when I understood something important. Silence when chosen is power. Silence when forced is punishment. My mother had always used silence as a threat, withholding affection, withdrawing approval, teaching us that love could vanish if we displeased her. This silence was different. This silence meant she had nothing left to say that would work. The first real test came at work. A week after the plea agreement became public record, I was called into my director's office. Not HR, my actual director. The woman who had watched me work myself to exhaustion for years without complaint. She gestured for me to sit. "I want to address something directly," she said, "because it's better to say it out loud." I nodded, heart steady. "We were contacted again," she continued, "by a family member. They attempted to raise concerns about your judgment and stability." I met her eyes, and I asked. She smiled faintly. "We declined to engage." Relief washed through me, slow and warm. "We reviewed your documentation," she added. "Your performance, your conduct, your transparency. There's nothing there to support those claims." "Thank you," I said quietly. She leaned back in her chair. "I also want you to know," she said, "that handling a situation like this with professionalism is not easy. You did that." I walked out of her office lighter than I had in years. The narrative my mother tried to build had failed where facts lived. That mattered. The next test came from Lauren. She called me one evening, hesitant. "I don't know how to do this without Mom," she said. "Do what I asked." "Be a sister," she admitted. I smiled sadly. "We've never really been allowed to," I said. "Not honestly." She was quiet for a moment. "I keep replaying things," she said. "Mom telling me you were selfish. You were cold. You didn't care." And now I asked. "And now I'm realizing how much you carried," she said, "and how little I questioned it." "That realization is yours," I replied. "What you do with it is up to you." She exhaled shakily. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but I don't want to lose you." I considered that carefully. "I'm not cutting you off," I said, "but our relationship won't look like it used to." She laughed weakly. "Nothing looks like it used to." No, I agreed. That's the point. We started slowly. Coffee, short conversations, no triangulation, no updates about Mom, clear boundaries. It felt awkward, honest, new. Meanwhile, Mark made his own choice. He accepted a job offer across the country. Fresh start, he told me over dinner. No history, no roles. I raised my glass to him. "You deserve that," I said. He hesitated. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I feel sad, but not guilty." He nodded slowly. "That took me a long time to understand," he said. The final test came unexpectedly. A letter arrived in the mail one afternoon, addressed in my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the counter and stared at it like it might bite. Eventually, I sat down and opened it carefully. The letter was short. "Claire, I don't know who you are anymore. The daughter I raised would never have done this to me. I hope someday you understand the damage you've caused. I will not reach out again. Your mother." I read it twice. There was no apology, no accountability, no acknowledgement of harm, just loss and blame. I folded the letter and placed it in my records folder, not as evidence, as closure. That night I drove out to Lake Briar again. The ice had begun to thaw at the edges of the lake, water dark and restless beneath the surface. I stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, breathing in cold air and something like peace. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who anticipated needs before they were spoken, the one who apologized for things she didn't do, the one who believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. She had survived. But she no longer ran my life. I took out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Holidays where I stood at the edge of the frame, birthdays where I held the camera, gatherings where my presence was assumed not appreciated. Then I opened my camera and took a photo of the lake at dusk. No people, no performance, just stillness. I posted it without a caption. The responses were quiet, thoughtful, beautiful, peaceful. "You look happy." I was. Not because everything was resolved, but because for the first time my life wasn't organized around someone else's chaos. I had learned something crucial. You don't need revenge to reclaim yourself. You need truth, boundaries, and the courage to endure being misunderstood. Silence wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. And in that silence, I finally heard my own voice. It told me something simple. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. The strange thing about rebuilding yourself is that it rarely looks dramatic from the outside. There were no confrontations, no courtroom speeches, no final showdown where everyone clapped or cried. The real shift happened in small, almost invisible ways, the kind that only mattered because they added up. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. That was the first sign. I hadn't noticed how automatic the reaction had become until it was gone. For years, every vibration carried the possibility of obligation, a favor, a crisis, a guilt-laced request wrapped in concern. Now it was just a sound. The second sign came at work. 2 months after everything settled, my director asked me to stay after a team meeting. I assumed it was about deadlines or staffing. Instead, she closed the door and smiled. "We're restructuring," she said, "and we want you to lead the new compliance oversight unit." I blinked. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "You've shown exceptional judgment under pressure, and you've handled complex risk situations with clarity." Risk situations. I almost laughed. "When would this start?" I asked. "Next quarter," she replied. "If you're interested." "I am," I said without hesitation. I walked back to my desk, feeling taller than I had in years. My mother used to tell people I didn't have a real job, that I just pushed papers, that my work didn't matter because it didn't revolve around family. Now my work was shaping policy, protecting people, making sure systems couldn't be abused the way she had abused me. There was something deeply satisfying about that symmetry. The third sign came from my body. I slept through the night. No more jolting awake at 3 in the morning replaying conversations. No more grinding my teeth. No more carrying tension in my shoulders like armor. I started running again. Slow at first, then stronger. The air in my lungs felt like proof of something returning. My therapist noticed it before I did. "You're not bracing anymore," she said one afternoon. "You're present." "I don't feel like I'm waiting for impact," I replied. She smiled. "That's what safety feels like." The tables weren't turning loudly. They were turning structurally. Meanwhile, my mother's world continued to shrink. Not in a cinematic way, in a social one. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. People who had relied on her for coordination found new ways to connect. Family events became smaller, quieter, less centered around her. She still posted occasionally, vague quotes about betrayal, about strength, about being misunderstood. They landed softly now, without traction. The attention she fed on had moved elsewhere. One afternoon, Mark sent me a photo. It was of a family gathering at our aunt's house. Casual, unposed, people talking in small clusters. Mom wasn't there. She wasn't invited, he wrote. I stared at the photo longer than I expected. "How do you feel about that?" he asked. I considered it honestly. Sad, I replied, and relieved. Both could be true. Lauren and I continued to build something fragile and new. We didn't talk about Mom unless it was necessary. We talked about books, about work, about how strange it felt to make decisions without consulting an invisible authority. One afternoon over coffee, she looked at me thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "I used to think strength was about control." I raised an eyebrow. "And now I think it's about restraint," she said, "about knowing when to stop." I smiled. "You're learning fast," I said. The biggest shift, though, came from inside me. I stopped narrating my life through her imagined reactions. I stopped wondering what she would say if she knew what I was doing, if she approved, if she disapproved. Her voice had lived in my head for so long I hadn't realized it wasn't mine. One evening at Lake Briar, I stood in the kitchen and made my grandmother's peach cobbler from memory. I didn't rush. I didn't second-guess the measurements. I trusted myself. As it baked, the house filled with warmth and sugar and something like belonging. I sat at the table alone and ate a slice straight from the dish. No performance. No one to please. Just me. The final confirmation came quietly. A letter from the court. The estate matter was officially closed, the property fully transferred, no further action pending. I held the paper in my hands and felt a sense of completion that surprised me. This wasn't about winning. It was about finishing something that had been left undone for generations. My mother had inherited her patterns, her need for control, her fear of scarcity. I had inherited something else. Choice. That night I wrote a short note and placed it in the drawer beneath my grandmother's old desk. "You were right. Thank you for trusting me." I closed the drawer gently. The tables had turned. Not because I forced them, but because I stepped away and let gravity do what it always does. Things fall where they truly belong. And for the first time I was standing on solid ground. I thought the story was finished. That was my mistake. Closure, I learned, isn't a straight line. Sometimes it circles back, not to pull you under again, but to test whether you really mean what you say when you claim you've changed. The test came on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. I was at Lake Briar sorting through a box of old photographs I'd finally worked up the courage to open. My grandmother's handwriting labeled most of them. Dates, places, small notes in the margins like Claire insisted on swimming even though it was cold. I smiled at that one. The knock at the door startled me. No one ever knocked out here unless they meant to. I froze listening. Another knock, firm, patient. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mark was already gone. Lauren had texted the day before saying she was busy. The nearest neighbor lived half a mile away. I stood slowly and looked through the window beside the door. My mother stood on the porch, alone. No dramatics, no props, no audience. Just her. My first instinct was to hide. The old instinct. The one that said avoidance was safer than confrontation. Then I felt something else rise up, quieter but stronger. I didn't owe her my fear anymore. I opened the door. We stood there facing each other, the lake stretching out behind me like a witness. "You shouldn't be here," I said calmly. "I know," she replied. Her voice was different, not softer, just stripped down, tired. "I won't stay long," she added. "I just need to say something." I considered my options. I could shut the door. I could tell her to leave. Or I could listen not as her daughter, but as a woman with boundaries. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. "You have 5 minutes," I said. She nodded once. "I didn't come to argue," she said quickly. "I know I've lost that right." I waited. "I didn't realize how much I depended on you," she continued. "Not just financially, emotionally." There it was, almost insight, almost. "You didn't depend on me," I said. "You consumed me." Her jaw tightened. "I did what I had to," she said. "I carried this family." "No," I replied evenly. "You controlled it." She flinched. "You always twist things," she said. I met her gaze steady. "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm naming it." She looked past me toward the lake. "I don't recognize my life anymore," she said quietly. "No one calls. No one asks me anything. I don't know where I fit." I felt a pang then, not guilt, grief, for the woman she could have been. "That's not my fault," I said gently. "And it's not my responsibility to fix." She turned back to me sharply. "So that's it," she demanded. "You just walk away." "I already did," I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I raised you," she said finally. "I gave you everything." I shook my head. "You gave me food and shelter," I said. "What you took was my autonomy, my peace, my sense of self." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to be a mother without needing something," she whispered. That was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "I know," I replied, "and that's why this can't continue." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "You look different," she said suddenly, stronger. I almost smiled. "I am," I said, "because I'm not carrying you anymore." She laughed bitterly. "You always were dramatic," she muttered. There it was, the reflex, the familiar dismissal. I didn't react. "That's your 5 minutes," I said. She stared at me like she expected something else. Anger, tears, apologies. When none came, she looked lost. "I don't know what you want from me," she said. "I don't want anything," I replied. "That's the point." I opened the door behind me. She hesitated, then stepped down off the porch. At the bottom of the steps, she turned back. "One day," she said, "you'll regret this." I thought about that. "I already regret what I tolerated," I said. "Not what I ended." She stood there for a long moment, then nodded once like she was filing something away. Without another word, she walked to her car and drove off. I watched until the road swallowed her up. Then I went back inside, my hands steady, my chest light. I hadn't won anything. I hadn't changed her. But I had passed the test. That evening, I called Lauren. "She came to the lake house," I said. Lauren exhaled sharply. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "She didn't tell me," Lauren added, "but I'm not surprised." We talked for a while. Not about Mom, about life, about plans, about ordinary things. After we hung up, I went back to the box of photographs. At the bottom, I found one I'd never seen before. My grandmother and me sitting on the dock. I couldn't have been more than 10. She had her arm around my shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. On the back in her handwriting were 4 words. "She knows who she is." I pressed the photo to my chest. That confrontation had been necessary. Not to heal her, but to confirm something for myself. I was no longer running, and I was no longer waiting for permission. There was only one chapter left, and it wasn't about her at all. The morning after my mother left the lake house, I woke before sunrise. Not from anxiety, from clarity. The air was cool and still, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but complete. I wrapped myself in a sweater and stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the first light spread across the water. The lake looked exactly the same as it always had, but I didn't. For most of my life, endings had terrified me. Endings meant punishment, abandonment, consequences. They meant I had failed someone. But this ending felt different. This ending felt earned. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who learned early that love was conditional, that approval was currency, that being useful was safer than being honest. I thought about how carefully I learned to read rooms, moods, silences. How I became excellent at anticipating needs that were never mine to meet. People used to call me dependable. What they really meant was exploitable. I didn't become strong overnight. Strength came in layers. First through exhaustion, then anger, then grief, then something quieter and steadier that stayed when the noise faded. Self-respect. I packed up the photographs and placed them back in the box, keeping only one out. The picture of my grandmother and me on the dock. She knew who I was long before I did. That thought stayed with me as I drove back to the city later that day. Life didn't magically become perfect. It became honest. At work, I took my new role seriously. Not because I needed validation, but because I respected my own abilities. I mentored younger women who reminded me of myself. Women who apologized before speaking, who carried too much, who confused loyalty with self-erasure. I never told them what to do. I asked better questions. Why do you feel responsible for that? What would happen if you said no? Who benefits when you stay silent? Watching them think felt like watching seeds break soil. Lauren and I found our rhythm. We were no longer playing assigned roles. No golden child, no responsible one. Just two women learning how to relate without fear. Some days were easier than others, but there was no manipulation between us, no invisible scorekeeping. That mattered. Mark sent photos from his new place, a small apartment, big windows, a life that belonged to him. He looked lighter in every picture. I didn't know it could be this quiet, he told me once. Quiet isn't empty, I replied. It's space. My mother stopped trying to contact me after the lake house visit. I heard about her occasionally through distant relatives or secondhand updates. She framed herself as misunderstood as always. That story no longer pulled me in. I wished her no harm. I also wished her no access. There is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. One frees you. The other requires trust. I chose freedom. On the anniversary of my grandmother's passing, I returned to Lake Briar alone. I brought flowers and a notebook. I sat on the dock where that photo had been taken and read aloud what I'd written. I told her about the job, about the boundaries, about the silence that finally felt safe. I told her that I understood now why she had protected me the way she did, not by fighting for me, but by believing in who I could become. As the sun dipped low, I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, not revenge, completion. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. Driving home that evening, I realized something important. The biggest revenge wasn't legal or financial or public. It wasn't exposing anyone or watching them fall. The biggest revenge was refusing to be who they needed me to be anymore. I used to think being the villain in someone else's story meant I had failed. Now I know better. Sometimes being the villain just means you stop playing the role that kept someone else comfortable at your expense. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in it, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who is always expected to bend, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not broken because you finally said no. You are allowed to outgrow the version of you that survived. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't require permission. And if the people who benefited from your silence call you heartless when you speak, let them. Your peace is not negotiable. Your dignity is not a debt. This story didn't end with applause or reconciliation or a perfect family photo. It ended with something better. A woman who knows her worth. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of something you've lived or something you're still carrying, I invite you to share your thoughts. Leave a comment. Tell your story. You're not alone in this. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about justice, karma, and women who reclaim their lives after betrayal, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more voices that deserve to be heard, including yours. Thank you for listening. And remember, choosing yourself is not the end of love. Sometimes it's the beginning.